Lee, Jeff, this slight eastern shift in Henri's track could really have a pretty big impact on parts of our area.
Oh yeah, there's no question about it. Jeff's going to take us through the region by region in just a moment. But what we want to say about that is, number one, the storm isn't canceled by any means. We're still going to get major impact from this storm. But if we can keep the core of the strongest winds east of the east end of Long Island, the 80 to 100 mile per hour potential, it's more like it's over southeastern New England. We're back to where we were talking about with the forecast late in the work week with the track just to our east, but we still have the torrential rainfall. We'll still have strong winds, a storm surge, and it'll be a damaging storm. We're at 74, and we've had buckets of rain here on the west side, putting down over 2 inches of rain, and in some cases across the 5 boroughs, over 3 inches of rain. So we still have a flash flood warning that'll take us for another hour and a half or so, and then we'll start to see that heaviest rain shift off to the west. What's happening is not only is there Henri, but there's a weather system off to our west, dipping the jet stream here, and that's definitely making a tropical connection in a pipeline to Henri's moisture, so that pulled that in advance. In addition, coupling with this area of high pressure offshore, it's channeling Henri off to the north. If Henri strengthens a little bit during the overnight, there's still a small window for that. There still could be a western wobble, so we're not discounting the fact there still could be an eastern Long Island landfall. But the trend right now is taking it a little weaker and a little bit to the east here, leaving the brunt of the strong winds just to our east, but still big impact nonetheless. Okay, so we have these big downpours right now. They're starting to shift off to the west. We'll go through New York City for another hour or so, I would say, and then that will subside. We'll get a clear break. So what Henri looks like right now, number one, it is flying off to the north at 21 miles an hour. Yes, it will slow, but unlikely to totally turn on the brakes, so it doesn't look, the evolution doesn't look as slow. However, you can see when it would likely be, near Montauk or just to the east, right around midday or so. Could a landfall be on Block Island? Very good possibility there. And then it tracks up through New England and away, so our conditions improve early in the week. We'll get to tide times in a second, but let's go through each facet of this storm. Meteorologist Jeff Smith in the Weather Center with that. Jeff.
Yeah, like we were pointing out, the strongest winds in these storms are almost always on the right-hand side of the track. If we can keep that just off to the east, we may have to get rid of this 80 to 100 mile per hour band. We hope we can do that later on tonight, but right now we're keeping it in there for now. So at least some gust up to about 80 miles per hour up in the Twin Forks during the day tomorrow, maybe 60 to 80 miles per hour in the Riverhead and Mastic area, more like 50 to 60 miles per hour western parts of Suffolk, all the way up into Fairfield County, Connecticut. Even into New York City, we could be dealing with 40 to 50 mile per hour gusts. It ramps down significantly as you head off to the west farther from the center of the storm. Check out the rainfall. So we've already achieved this, by the way, in New York City, getting over 2 inches of rain in the park, but we're in the 2 to 4 inch band, maybe trending toward the 4, more like 4 to 8 inches closer to the center of the storm over eastern parts of Long Island. That extending also into southwestern Connecticut and parts of the mid-Hudson Valley as well. Less rain off to the south and west. And storm surge, the other big factor in this storm. And right now I put the wind vectors on here just to show you where the wind is going to be pushing the water into. And right now we're thinking it can push water from Long Island Sound onto the north shore of the island. The big question is, and that could be a 3 to 6 foot surge, will it occur during the time of high tide? Lee has much more on that.
Right, and I think it will, Jeff, especially when you talk about the north shore of the island. Now, when you talk about Montauk, that high tide is as the system is approaching. High tide may, the actual, closest pass may occur a little later in the morning, but it's close enough. That water's still surging. But when you look at a Stamford at around 12 o'clock, I mean, that's when the water is really piling up there. So I am concerned, especially on the North Shore, places like a Hempstead Bay or an Oyster Bay, and even back to Flushing Bay, LaGuardia. I mean, could they get a big enough surge here where there's some splash over under the runways at LaGuardia? We'll have to watch. It's going to depend on how close that track is and the intensity. But meanwhile, as you look at the futurecast here, we have a little quiet window here for a few hours, and then some of those bands are going to start a resurgence around 5 in the morning, and then things really start to light up. Look at how that western eye wall is very close to the east end of the island. And I think one thing we're not going to escape is this widespread heavy rain. This is very left side loaded on the rainfall. So that's all coming in throughout the day into the evening hours and piling up the rainfall total. So we could get a lot of inland flooding over the Hudson Valley, even parts of northern New Jersey, New York City, and Connecticut as well before the storm finally pulls out. So bands of heavy rain and strong winds are moving in just after sunrise. We're at 75, really sultry out there. 77. Rain and wind from Henri. Greatest impacts obviously across eastern Long Island, but the entire area feels impact, and lingering rain will go into tomorrow evening, and it'll just be really muggy and humid. I hope we don't lose power in the area, because look what happens post-storm. We really heat up. It's steamy Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday before we get a little relief later in the week into next weekend. Much more in this storm coming up in our next half hour, guys.
All right.